Now pay close attention to this story because it might be more similar to your own life than you realize. Cole and Gisele were a simple couple. He was American, she was Brazilian. A marriage built on cultural differences, but with something rare: unity of purpose. They met during a season where both were trying to rebuild their lives. Cole had been through professional instability. Gisele had left Brazil searching for a better future, carrying courage, faith, and a strong desire to start over in a new country. At the beginning, everything felt aligned. Long conversations, shared dreams, plans that felt possible. But what held them together was not just emotion, it was faith. Gisele was a hardworking, disciplined woman, a true fighter in daily life. She was genuinely God-fearing, not just in words, but in attitude and action. She would wake up early every day, organize her responsibilities, and face work with discipline and resilience. Even under pressure, she avoided complaining. There was a quiet strength in her, rooted in faith rather than circumstances. They did not live in luxury, and life was not easy. But they had something many people lose over time: living dreams. They had plans. They wanted to grow together, build something solid, achieve financial stability, help their families, and live a dignified life. And above all, they had faith. It was not a superficial faith. It was a faith practiced daily. They prayed together. They talked about God in everyday life. They tried to do what was right, even when it was difficult. But there was a problem. Nothing, absolutely nothing, was happening. Days passed, weeks passed, months passed, and their lives felt stuck in the same place. Their bank account did not grow. Opportunities did not appear. Plans stayed on paper. And the hardest part of all, God seemed silent. At this point, something Napoleon Hill observed in his studies on success fits perfectly here. The difference between those who succeed and those who quit is not talent, but persistence when there is no visible result. And this became their greatest test. Gisele began to feel something dangerous growing inside her: doubt. She did not want to feel it, but she did. Is God really listening? Are we doing something wrong? Why does nothing ever change for us? She did not say it all the time, but these thoughts began to visit her more often. Cole noticed it, but he was also struggling. On the outside, he tried to stay strong, but on the inside, he was tired of fighting without seeing results. This connects directly with something Jesus taught very clearly. Faith is not just about starting well. It is about remaining. In the parable of the sower, many received the seed, but only a few continue when conditions become difficult. Now tell me something. Have you ever been through this? Write it in the comments, because I want to know if this is just my experience or something more people go through. Because there is a moment almost nobody talks about. It is not when you lose everything. It is when you do everything right, and still, nothing happens. And that is exactly when their life became even more difficult. Bills began to pile up for real. It was no longer discomfort. It became pressure. Overdue payments, constant notifications, calls they started avoiding. The atmosphere inside the house changed. Less conversation, more silence, more hidden worry. And here comes a principle Florence Scovel-Shinn often emphasized. What you sustain internally during crisis determines what you manifest afterward. But at that moment, it was not theory. It was emotional survival. And then, the day that changed everything arrived. Gisele was called into work. She thought it was a normal day, but it was not. Within minutes, everything changed. She was laid off. No warning, no preparation, no backup plan. In that moment, it felt like the ground disappeared. She left in silence, got into her car. And before she could even process what was happening, She broke down in tears, but it was not a normal cry. It was a breakdown, a cry of fear, of despair, of someone who feels completely at the limit. Now it's over, was the thought that crossed her mind, and this strongly resembles what King David experienced in moments of extreme pressure. Even though he was anointed, he went through seasons where he felt forgotten, yet he continued trusting the process before the promise. When she arrived home, Cole looked at her and understood everything without a single word. The weight of that moment fell on both of them. And that night, for the first time, their prayer was not strong. It was not beautiful. It was not filled with confident faith. It was weak, broken, interrupted by tears. And here is something Rick Warren teaches about spiritual maturity. God is not only interested in quick answers, but in building depth during the process. And still, they did not stop, because this is where most people quit, but they did not. The following days became even harder. Now, it was not just pressure, it was real fear about the future. Even though Gisele was strong, hardworking, and God-fearing, she began to feel lost. But something interesting started to happen. Even in the middle of chaos, they kept praying. Sometimes without motivation, most days without emotion, but they continued. Even exhausted, they stayed faithful. Even frustrated, they did not turn faith into complaint. And the Bible repeatedly reveals this pattern. Joseph had a dream, but went through prison before the palace. Moses spent years in the desert before his mission. David was anointed, but lived the process before the throne. And then something began to change. Not outside first, but inside. Gisele began to feel a strange peace, inexplicable. It did not make sense considering their situation, but it was there. Days later, an opportunity appeared. But it was not just any opportunity. It was something she had never considered before. Something completely outside their original plan, something bigger, better, and aligned with her true potential for growth. What looked like loss was repositioning. What looked like an ending was direction. The job she lost was small compared to what was coming. And in that moment, everything finally made sense. Because the most important thing was never only what they were asking for, but who they were becoming while waiting. And maybe that is exactly what you needed to understand today. Because the biggest mistake is thinking God is silent, when in reality, He is working on something you are not yet ready to see. If this made sense to you, there is probably someone who needs to hear it too. Share this video with that person. And now I want to know. If you made it this far, comment, "I made it."